Greetings and welcome back to Cedar Circle. In this series, I am recreating my childhood neighborhood in Minecraft, my childhood home, and a lot of memories from the late 70s, 80s, and early 90s. Today, I want to talk about a special memory that I have, and that is why I have made it night. My dad was something of a astronomer hobbyist, as was my best friend Jeff's parents. And back in these days, there weren't a ton of street lights on the streets. In fact, there really weren't any street lights that I can remember. So our neighborhood was fairly dark, and Jeff's house backed up to this big, huge field. So as you can imagine, there wasn't a lot of light pollution at night. So anytime that my dad read in a magazine that there was going to be a meteor shower, we would come out here onto Jeff's deck, and we would have our sleeping bags, and the parents would have quilts and blankets, and they'd make hot chocolate. Sometimes they would make homemade vanilla ice cream in a manual churning thing with a little motor on it. The parents would generally sit up on the swing or on different lawn chairs they would bring. They'd line them up along the back of the house. And the kids would lay on the floorboards with our sleeping bags. And you could look down through the cracks, down to the darkness below, given that it was pitch dark. And you could look off, and basically, I wanted to recreate the sense of a shooting star. So we would sit out here on the deck and we would watch shooting stars. So the build itself, the deck has been here since episode, 2 or 3. The star is what I've added now. I think it looks pretty good. But the memory that I have of shooting stars was actually one of deception and of childhood fright. Now, I wasn't scared of shooting stars. In fact, I loved looking up at the space and just seeing the emptiness and then watching for these streaks of light. And I could never really figure out how to envision and how to translate the physical size of my world up to the physical size of what must be up there. And I think I must have been, I was old enough to know better than to be afraid, but I was not old enough to get over the fear. And it wasn't afraid of the dark. I knew every inch of this backyard, every inch of this neighborhood by heart. I could navigate it with my eyes closed. I could navigate it at a full 15 miles per hour sprint while being chased in a game of hide and seek tag. But what I was afraid of was the moment of silence before the shooting stars. So everyone would be up on the deck talking, having a good time. You would have no issues. And then it would get really quiet. And we'd all just lay here and we'd just be looking up at the stars, just waiting. And the anticipation would grow and grow and grow. And a split second before a shooting star went across was the deepest silence of all. And then someone would shout, "There's one! Oh, I saw one! Oh, over there!" And everybody would, Where? And something about that split second when the sound went from absolute pin drop silence to everyone shouting at once and the anticipation coming out. Now, the anticipation itself, or the "there's one," was a shout of joy. But that moment right before, it's like when you're on a big roller coaster and you're going up the hill and you're being ratcheted clank, 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 clank by that belt that pulls the car up the hill. And as you're getting closer and closer to the top, you're almost there, almost there, almost there. The tension is growing. And the ride down is exhilarating. But that moment right as you're cresting the top, when at any second you could break and slide back down, or the wood could crumble, you could fall, that moment before everyone screams, that's somehow that was terrifying to me out here in the cold night air. And it got to a point where I didn't really want to sit out here and watch the stars with a big group. I had no problem watching them alone, but I was scared of that moment of silence. And I remember one day, in fact, I was coming up these stairs right here, and I told my parents, I don't really want to watch the stars tonight. And they were just shocked, like, why, And we were talking about it and stuff, and eventually I said I was somehow, I don't know if I said it here or if I said it earlier, but I said I was scared. And at that moment of saying I was scared, I had to make up what was I scared of because I didn't know how to describe it. And I told my parents that I was scared of a giant hand coming up out of the ground and crushing us in its fist. And I guess in some way that's how the sound felt to me, this thing just bursting up and enveloping me. And somehow, I don't know if it was my sister or my parents or somebody, like, I remember coming up here, and right as I was coming around here, they were saying, like, are you afraid of the hand? And I had this split-second internal panic of knowing that that sounds so stupid for a grown kid to be afraid of a giant hand. And yet somehow it was better than saying I was afraid of the moment of silence right before we saw a shooting star. I remember that Jeff's sister was there. She was a little older, so it was even more embarrassing. Like, oh my God, she probably thinks I'm a little kid. My younger sister and Jeff were younger than me, and they always looking up to me as like the bravest kid in the neighborhood. And he's afraid of a giant hand, which is nonsensical. And I can just imagine my parents thinking like, okay, he's reading too much. He's playing too many of those Nintendo or Atari games. His imagination's too active. And I remember looking down through the cracks in the deck and seeing the darkness below and like envisioning what it would look like for a hand to come up. And it was ridiculous. I mean, it was the dumbest lie I think I've ever told. But I just couldn't bring myself to tell them I was afraid of that transition from silence to joy. So as you can see, I have also been working on the tree line back here by Oak Hill Elementary School. And in particular, I wanted to put the sled hill in and the ditch because, of course, it is wintertime. And I thought this is a great motivator to get me back into this build. So the tree line, I think, is pretty good. This hill could probably be a tiny bit steeper, but I'm okay with it for now. And the trees kind of taper off and then go off into a neighborhood, which we'll talk about in the far future of this series. But today I wanted to take a look at the sled hill. Now, everything else out here is probably a midsummer build. But the school and the schoolyard over there, and this section along through here is definitely a fall build when I think of it in my mind. Everything is, starting to turn this dusty yellow color. There's bare sticks and branches falling off the trees. The trees are still green, but not for long. Not for too long. And I don't know what happened here. I used an MC Edit filter. I'm in Minecraft 1.12 still because MC Edit doesn't work for Minecraft 1.13 yet. And I believe it's an A Brightmore filter called Forester to build this. And so these are all big giant oak trees. I think some of the trunks should be a little bit thicker, like this one mixed in, because these are pretty tall, pretty old oaks. And then this part right here definitely needs to be thinned out. I'm going to work on this at a later date. And the school itself, I mean, this looks like a nuclear disaster of a school. I butchered this because I realized the school was sticking out too far on both sides. So it must have been an addition after I haven't been there in a while. Anyway, I'll fix this later. But today, The focus of what I wanted to do is the sled hill, and particularly the ditch. So I don't know why this ditch is here. I don't know how it got here, but when we moved in, there was a ditch in the middle of this hill, and in the winter, of course, all the plants are kind of tromped down by the fallen snow. And this ditch in particular was where we chose to do our sledding. We would take our sleds and we'd put them up at the top, and it was almost like a mini little toboggan. Now, the ditch itself was probably 1.5 feet deep at the most, and we could go right down the middle of the ditch, and there'd be like a slope on either side. I'm afraid this Minecraft boat is not giving you the full speed of the ditch because it's getting stuck between the blocks. Oh well, that didn't quite work the way I was envisioning it. There we go. But we used to put your sled at the top of the ditch, and you'd either have someone push you or you would run and then jump into your sled and then zoom down through the ditch. And at the end, the ditch would kind of taper out, and you would see who could go the farthest here across this sort of open plain. And if you got to the grass, it would pretty much slow you down, but you'd consider yourself like have gone really far. You'd consider yourself like the winner. And the other thing about this is if you walked right to the edge of where the high grass wasn't mowed in front of the ditch, if you looked between Jeff's house and Danielle's house, you could just see my house in the distance right here. Now, when I was really young, that birch tree or cedar tree was there, but that got cut down, like, I don't know when, but it got cut down by the time we were allowed to go this far from home without any chaperone. And so you could see the yellow of my house, and most importantly, you could see the front porch light. And the way this worked was we would be allowed to go out here, go to the ditch, go sledding, until my mom turned the porch light on. When she turned the porch light on, that was a symbol it was getting dark, and we were supposed to go home. Of course, we probably didn't go home for like another 20 minutes after that, because we would ignore it and pretend we didn't see it. And then at some point, my mom actually got a whistle and would blow a whistle once, and that was our signal to come home. And looking at the distance now, it's not that far, but man, when you were kids, it felt like it was forever and away. Now, the other place so for some reason, we didn't really care for sledding on this part of the hill as much. But the other place that we used to sled all the time was over here on this side of the hill. And I got to work on this build coming up. But basically, this spot right here, right along the building, and then spilling out into the parking lot, which is here, was so cool and steep. And then over here, there was like a fence with some sort of electrical generator, maybe, equipment here. And the snow would go down this steep hill, and then we would have it go, so it'd go down here, and then we'd have it go up the side of the fence like a half pipe, sort of. And we would sled here, and we would we'd play this game where we'd like tackle each other and try to knock each other off your sled on the way down. And whoever was the last person, like we'd all line up here and then go. And whoever was the last person still on their sled when they got to the bottom was the winner. We did that a lot. We were pretty rough. But over here, what we used to play was the person on the sled would have a football, and the other kids would be lined up on either side of the ditch, as far down as you wanted, but usually like in the middle section. And this person would get a good running start and jump onto their sled and try to hold that football. And as you got by these kids, they would jump off the sides of the ditch and try to get the football from you. So first they'd just try to knock it out of your arms or knock you off your sled. And then somebody would grab the football and have to jump back on a sled, and whoever got to the bottom with the football in their arms was the winner. And we played this game all the time. It didn't matter how cold it was. It didn't matter how icy or how thick the snow was. You know, we had to tamp down the snow after a first winter snow so that it was packed down and slick and made a nice slide. But man, we played that game all the time. We probably had, 5, 6 kids that would come and play. Sometimes we'd have a bigger crew, sometimes a smaller crew, 2, 3 kids, but it was a lot of fun. So those are the 2 memories of sledding. I'm not going to put snow on this side because I kind of want to build this as, like I said, the school is sort of fall memories and the summer memories are kind of out through here. This is sort of a late summer memory. And this through here is sort of a spring and summer memory. But this ditch and this sled hill is a winter memory, so I had to make it full of snow. All right, so I don't know how much time I've spent, but that is definitely it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed a little glimpse into my childhood memories of Cedar Circle.